And you may have had other lectures. I know Abari Sensei lectures a lot about worldview. That's one of his specialties that he interacts on is worldview. But it's how you look at your world. It's like this. When I put on my sunglasses, everything changes. How I see my screen changes. Looking at my window is different. Looking at my paper is different because the lens that I'm seeing the world in has changed. That's what a worldview is. A worldview is a lens that you see the world through. Now, it's not as simple as just putting on glasses because most of us do not even know that we have glasses on. Most of us do not even know that we have a worldview. The greatest leader of all time made this statement. He said, your eye is like a lamp that provides light for your body. But when your eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light. But when your eye is unhealthy, your whole body is filled with darkness. And if the light you think you have is actual darkness, is how deep is that darkness? Meaning the lens that you're looking at, if it is dark, then everything else becomes dark. And so you have to have the right lens to see, or at least you have to understand what your lens is. One of our professors at Western Kentucky University has written a few books on worldview. He has now already died, but he was here when I was a student. It's Dr. Ronald Nash, and he said in its simplest term, or simplest way, a worldview is a set of beliefs about the most important issues of life. It's about the most important things that we think of. It's a conceptual scheme by which we consciously or even unconsciously place or fit everything we believe, and by which we interpret and judge reality. It's like the example that when a fish is in water, the fish does not know it's in water. That's its environment. It's how it sees its world. When I have a different pair of glasses on, I may not even, if these are the ones I always wear, I may not even realize that I'm looking differently through these lenses than I am through another set of lens. There are 5 key elements to every person's and actually every culture's worldview. There's more than just 5 total, but these are the 5 that I emphasize the most and are the very central. The first one is the element of God. Is there a God or is there not a God? The issue of reality, the issue of knowledge, morality, and humanity. We're going to look at each of these 5 things because every culture that you will travel to will have a view of these 5 things. Sometimes the view is very explicit or it's very clear. Other times it's kind of fuzzy. They don't even realize that there is a worldview that is there. So the first one is your worldview is about God. And it answers or it asks the question or answers the question, is there a God? Are we alone? If so, who, what is he, she, or it? Is there one God or more than one gods? Are humans God? What is God like? Is God personal? Is he unpersonal? Does he have to be appeased? Now, when I teach this in America, I often also talk about what the biblical assumption or what the Bible says about these views. And the biblical assumption is that there is one God, monotheism. But I will skip that part and I will look at here in just a second. Everybody in their view of God, they can fall into one of three categories. There can be an atheist, an agnostic, or a theist. An atheist would basically say there is no God or no gods. An agnostic is from the Greek word gnostic, which means knowledge. Gnosis is the word. It means agnostic means I do not know if there is a God. Maybe there's a God. Maybe there's not a God. I don't know. And a theist believes there is a God, okay? Everybody in the world kind of falls into one of those kind of 3 categories of life. Now, if a person is a theist, they're either a monotheist or they're a polytheist. A monotheism says that there is one God. Polytheism says there are many gods. Okay, I am a Christian theist, and I will explain that in a second. If you're a polytheist, the main religions are like Taoism, Hinduism, Buddhism would fall into this to some degree, and Shinto, which is the major religion of Japan. I also use the word polytheism or spirits because some people would call in some religions, it's not that God is more like a spirit, or there's the spirits that are there. When I first came to Tokyo, I saw Japan, I saw very few churches, but I saw hundreds, thousands of shrines, Buddhist shrines or Shinto shrines, and they are often for these different spirits that are there. Now, if you're monotheist, there's three primary monotheistic religions: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Those are the three. If you're monotheistic or if you're polytheistic, monotheistic is Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Now, let me explain why this is so important. This graph here came from 2012, but it kind of gives you the percent of the world and what their views of God are. 31.5% are Christians. That's about 2.2 billion people would identify as a Christian or in the Christian faith. There are 23.2 Muslims, which is about 1.6 Muslims around the world. There are 16% that are unaffiliated, 15% that are Hindus. That's about 1 billion Hindus. There are 7.1% Buddhists, which is about 500 million Buddhists that are there. But if you add up these percentages, you will see that between 85 and over 90% of the people in all of the world believe something about God. And so it's helpful, it's important to understand, if I want to be a global leader, I need to have a greater understanding of religion, because though I may be agnostic or I may be an atheist, or that person may think that, the person they are leading may not be, because so much of the world, so much of the population really is a person has faith or has a belief in God. A minute ago, I mentioned that I was a Christian theist. And so I want to explain very briefly what that means. It means I'm a theist. I believe there's a God, and I believe in Christianity. And Christianity centers around the person of Jesus Christ. And the person of Jesus Christ, he focused upon, it relates to the person's entire worldview, that we Christian theists believe that humans are special, that we're unique, that we're not like the rest of creation, that we have been made in the image of God, but because of rebellion, we left and sinned against God. But God loved us so much that he allowed Jesus Christ to come to this earth as a human and to die on the cross for our sins, but then also to rise again. The most famous verse in all of the Bible about Christianity is John 3:16, and it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." And that's a verse that just talks about what Jesus did for us because of his love for us, and that each person can believe in him if they want to do so. Now, each person in the world, again, there's 31% that are Christians and 23% that are Muslim, that are Hindus or Buddhist or other religions. Each person has to decide what they believe. They have to think, and that's their own choice on what they want to believe about their view of God. If you're interested in learning more about what I believe, I have put, and you can take a screenshot of this if you would like. This is my email address. This is my Facebook. This here is a film called the JesusFilm.org, and that you can watch. That is a movie about the person of Jesus Christ, and you can watch it in any language in the world. You can watch it in Hindi. You can watch it in in Japanese, you can watch it in French, or you can watch it in English. And these are the two groups that I work with when I come to Japan, Student Impact, and then this site here is Students in Japan, and they also, they help us to have questions if you have questions about the Christian, being a Christian theist. But I wanted to show you that as well. So the first issue of a person's worldview is their view of God. Okay. The second view is their view of reality. And what is real? Is it only what we can see, feel, taste, and smell and examine? Or is this, or is it physical, or is it also metaphysical? Meaning, is it just what we can see with our senses, or is there more to life, more to the world, more to reality than just the senses? I use the word metaphysical. Let me explain what it means, what metaphysics means. Some of you may be very familiar, others may not be familiar with the term. Metaphysical studies generally seek to explain inherent or universal elements of reality which are not easily discovered or experienced in everyday life, such as our concern with explaining the features of reality that exist beyond the physical world and our immediate senses. So the metaphysical are things not just that we see with our senses, touch, feel, or see, or smell, but is there something else that is real that we may not even know that is there, but it's a metaphysical, it's beyond physics that is there, okay? That's how we view about reality. That is one reason I believe in Japan, there are so many shrines. It's because of the metaphysical, we try to understand the spiritual world that is around us in life. We also have, Eric, that one slide, I missed that one, says Aristotle called metaphysics the first philosophy, or sometimes the just wisdom, and says it is a subject that deals with the first causes and the principles of things, purpose, meaning, and of identity. Second one now is the issue of knowledge, or the third one is the issue of knowledge. What is truth? Can truth be known? Is truth relative? Is there truth and error, or is there absolute truth? Each person, each culture has a view of where they get their truth from and what that significance. For instance, if you're Muslim and you're from Saudi, your truth comes from the Quran. If you're Christian, you would have the truth, or your knowledge would come from the Bible. And so there is different aspects of truth. John 14:6 is a verse that says, Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. Next one is the issue of morality. Is there a right and is there a wrong? Is there good and is there bad? Who determines what is right and wrong? And so every culture decides that. For instance, we talked about Japan a few minutes ago, and we talked about how you act on the train. Are you quiet, or do you speak? Do you take off your shoes? Now, not that that is right or wrong, but there are customs that we start to believe that are right and are wrong in life. And the last one is our view of humanity. Are humans a product of chance? Is humanity different than the rest of creation? Is man basically good and needs no help, or is man broken and needs rescue? Is life anthrocentric, or does humanity answer to anyone? And so those are all views of a person's worldview: the view of God, their view of reality, their view of knowledge, their view of morality, and then their view of humanity as well. And so I want to give an example of this to discuss a second. I have on the screen here, if you're from Japan, you may know who this person is. He's called Japan's hero of the Holocaust, Junui Sugihara. Let me explain. He is one of the most famous Japanese. He was a Japanese diplomat during World War II, and he was basically the vice consul for Japan in Lithuania. And during the Holocaust, he basically decided to help Jews that were trying to escape and needed an exit visa and a visa through Japan. And he is credited for saving nearly 6,000 Jewish people by giving them visas so they could escape the Holocaust. He made this decision, but by making this decision, it cost him his job. He was placed in prison for at least 2 years, but now he's considered a hero in life. But he made this statement. He's a very fascinating man. I had the chance to lecture at Waseda through this, and he is actually from Waseda. He's a graduate from Waseda University in Japan. This is one of his famous quotes. He says, "I may have to disobey my government, but if I don't, I'll be disobeying God." Now, this is a fascinating quote of his, but let me explain why this is significant on this next slide. What you do is you see Shugahara's worldview by that quote. You see his view of God, meaning that God can be obeyed or disobeyed. So he had an understanding that there is a God, so he's a theist, but he also knows that he is accountable to God. And since he is accountable to God, he answers to him or needs to make sure he's pleasing to God more than he is to the government. He has a view of reality, meaning his view of reality is it wasn't just a physical, and although he could not see God, he knew there was something metaphysical, there was something greater than him. He had a view of humanity. He believed that a Jewish person, even though they were Jewish, they still had value, and they were created, and they were willing to be saved. And so he thought, that person is valuable, so I will risk my job and I will risk my livelihood to save them. He had a view of morality. He basically was willing to disobey his government because that would be against the rules, because it was wrong to be killing Jews in the Holocaust. And he had a view of knowledge when he knew what the truth was. And even though what he thought truth was different than his government at that time, he followed the truth that was internal, that was more significant. See, Shugahara's, his entire worldview was lived out even in this quote. I don't think he ever articulated necessarily his worldview, but each person has a worldview. And sometimes our worldview is challenged, or our worldview is we have to understand it so we can communicate it to other people as well. So there are 5 points of our worldview: God, reality, knowledge, morality, and humanity. And I believe the globalization of our world requires us to develop CQ and understand different worldviews that are there. Now, I have another question here. Which worldview issue is the most confusing to you, or which one do you understand the least, or is the most different for you? Okay, so what I want to do is I want us to break up into groups again, and Obari Sensei will break us up into groups. I want your group to discuss which of those 5 worldview things are the most unique or the most different for you, or you have that you need to learn more about. So let's just discuss the issue of worldview. And so Obari Sensei, if you can break us up into the groups, that would be wonderful.
Yes. Again. Sorry. Okay, let's. Okay, could you spend about 10 minutes discussion? Okay, let's go.
Okay, we are headed back. We're back into the group. I'm curious.
Professor Thomas, we have only 15 minutes left, you know.
Yes, okay. 15
are you going to cover the ethnocentrism next week?
I'm going to do that next week.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah.
Yes, I will. My plan is to do that next week.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
I wanted to find out your discussion. What was, as in your group, how did you discuss worldview? Which worldview issue was the most confusing, or the newest for you, or the one that you discussed most in your group? So give me some feedback.
If I may say in front of our group, so we had a lot of discussion, which is the most confusing, but we came to the conclusion that the most difficult part actually, and the most abstract part to understand and to kind of visualize in the brain is the worldview of reality. So yeah, it's the most difficult one to actually grasp with our current knowledge and brain.
Okay, good. Thank you. The issue of reality. Good. Somebody else.
For me, we in our group we talk a little about do you believe in God and what else? So what's confusing, I think, is in America, I know that some people who are like really extreme and they believe in God and nothing else, and they still teach science, but they teach science in like I don't think it's a correct way, but because it's their belief, so they doing like so. And so for me, I think it's confusing to understand other people's perspective because of their beliefs.
Okay. Yes, and that if I understood you correctly, you're talking about religion and science, and do they mix together, or are they separate? How can you be a scientist and be religious or believe in God? Those issues, and that's many discussions. We as professors often have that discussion. I do not believe there is a conflict. I believe you can understand both, but those are very, very interesting conversations to have. Very good observation.
Thank you.
Other things you discussed in your group.
Yep. So can I speak? Yeah. So
Hi.
My group, all members think God doesn't exist, but the notion of God is we agree with notion of God is very important for morality also.
Okay, good. You're also the view of God.
Yeah.
Well, our group discussed the view of God, and sometimes how the view of God can be confusing, and how sometimes in some cultures that, like in France, you would never talk about God in class necessarily, but how that may be a difference from different cultures that are around. Those different views, the different worldviews every culture has those 5 things that they think about. Every person has a lens or puts on glasses that views those 5 things as well. And so what I want to do is I want to show one more slide, and then we'll be done, and you'll have a time to add some stuff into the discussion. We go past these real quick. Let me see. We've already talked about him, his view of God. Okay, we've discussed there. What we need to do is we have to develop our CQ knowledge. And the way we develop our CQ knowledge is we see the role of culture in your own life. you have to understand there's basic cultural systems and that there's cultural values we need to look at. These are the basic six cultural systems that we think of holistically: our economics, marriage and family, education, legal and politics, artistic expression, and then religion. We've discussed religion, some of those, but we've discussed these others. Those other worldviews relate to almost all of these cultural systems that are there. Those are all of the cultural values or the cultural knowledge we need to understand so we can develop a more consistent basic cultural system that is there. Now, next week, we're going to talk about cultural CQ strategy, and we'll be talking about developing a sensitivity to the culture. It's called cultural sensitivity, and discuss ethnocentric and ethno-relative stages. I've only asked you to be prepared to do one thing. I will bring you slides again for next week. We'll have more discussion, the second half of the discussion from this book. But I want you to also not to forget to think about your purpose in life. My purpose in life is, and we'll discuss that when we talk about cultural knowledge as well, and global leadership, and each leader needs to have a purpose. And so with those things said, I will go ahead and end today's lecture. I'll turn it back over to Obari Sensei, and then I think he may have you write some things in the chat or other discussions that you would like to have. So I will stop sharing, and Obari Sensei, I will turn it over to you so you can finish up the class if you would like.
Okay, Professor Weakley, thank you very much for your lovely lecture. We've been very much inspired by your talk this morning.
Thank you.
And I think I sent you some information, the chat. You see, today we are discussing the sort of worldviews and cross-cultural IQ. But why these topics are so important? I sent you some information about Cambridge, Faraday Institute. That's the most famous advanced institute dealing with the sort of science and theology, or science and religion. That's what they're discussing, today's important issue, the metaphysics. And everyone, Newton. Newton is a physicist, a scientist, and also later he studied theology. And he's an expert in this field, science and theology. But as far as I'm concerned, if I look at the Japanese worldviews, there seem to be some contradiction between science and religion, or science and theology. But I don't think so. So what I really want you to think about is your own worldviews, like a cosmo, I will show you some slide first, Can you see this? Yeah. You see, in this class, we're going to deal with ontology and epistemology. And the things belong to three realms, right? One realm is things we can observe or perceive. The second realm is we can observe or we can perceive with some particular instrument. But the realm three is a sort of a kingdom where we cannot observe or perceive anything, no matter what kind of instrument you use. But your research area does belong to the realm three. Okay, that's had a lot to do with your worldviews and scientific realism and whatever. So let's see the cross-cultural iceberg. This easy to see part is a sort of a surface culture. Maybe this may belong to the kingdom realm 1 and 2. However, the difficult to see this part more or less related to the realm 3, partially the realm 2. And what I really want to emphasize is a paradigm, metaphysics. The way you look at the world, what you believe in, more or less what you believe in is related to your real purpose, what your purpose is all about. And the cosmology, who created the heaven and earth, and the evolution versus creation, the meaning of humans, what makes us human. and also cause and effect. How would you interpret the cause and effect? And then the concept of time, how would you interpret the concept of time, life after death, and whatever. And sometimes the worldview will be found out in the rituals, funeral service, marriage service, New Year, and whatever. Those are a very important topic. And at the top-notch university in the world, like Cambridge and Oxford, they often talk about this kind of metaphysics, whatever the subject you're dealing with. And later I will introduce Professor Tarasenko. He's a world well-known scholar in the field of computer science. He invented the jet engine, And so those things are very important, like Newton's ideas. So I want you to look at the Faraday's, Summer Institute stuff. And there are many famous scientists, theologians, and they're discussing this kind of thing, worldviews, metaphysics, and other things. So still today, the seminar is going on up to July the 3rd, and you can look at and watch this kind of lecture series, these kind of lecture series with YouTube. It's entirely free this semester because of coronavirus, So the next week assignment, you may be a little bit, tired, just simply listen to the lecture. But from next week on, I want you to practice the presentation, right? So you don't have to spend so much time, but I want you to make 7 slides, present your CQ and worldviews. Today we have discussed, some CQs and worldviews. So I want you to make 7 slides and then present your slide for 3 minutes. Everyone going to make a presentation. However, you have to follow the format. Like I just uploaded some formats on your, this is a Faraday Institute stuff, You're gonna look at this. And this one, I uploaded over here. The PowerPoint slide template, so you're going to download the template and then try to learn the useful expressions. Especially the important part is first title page, and then the outline, and the main parts, and summary and conclusion, right? But when you talk about the conclusion, you always, say it, okay? Keep this expression in mind. This is my outline. I have divided my presentation into 5 sections, first, second, and third, right? And then you go into the main part. Let me now start with the main part, first one. But when you come to the summary part, you often say, to recap what I have discussed so far, or to sum up my presentation. And in conclusion slide, you simply say, in conclusion. So I want you to, really follow those expression formats using some simple basic expressions in English presentation. And then I will be teaching you more variety of useful expressions, okay? That's for the next week assignment, okay? So could you look at Faraday's, slide, Faraday Institute, that's a very famous institute. Okay, do you have any questions or comments? I think that's all about it today. No comments, no questions?
I'm sorry, Sensei, I have a
question.
Hi. Yes. Do we need to upload these presentations somewhere, or we just need to present next time?
After you finish up your presentation, could you upload, on the Facebook? Yeah, you're going to make a 7 simple slide, okay? 7 simple slide. However, you have to really stick to the format, right? Title page, outline, and the main parts, summary, and conclusion, okay?
And then upload to the Facebook group.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. You don't have to make a very complicated slide this time. And then next week, everyone going to make a presentation, about 3 minutes, okay? And so you can express your own worldviews and the cross-cultural IQ and whatever. Is that clear to you all? And later on, gradually, you are going to be making a presentation about your field, scientific field, okay? Your research field. And also, since I have given you the handout about scientific realism, And could you read this, scientific realism, what is scientific realism is?